This story here, Whitney Webb reveals something about RFK Jr. that I was not aware of, but it makes a lot of damn sense. And about the Kennedy family in general. Many people have been asking, why does he have this position that he has in reference to Israel and Gaza? Well, Whitney Webb has actually spoken to RFK Jr. prior to his election. And Whitney Webb has some things to say. Now, she had this conversation with Kim Iverson. I think you need to listen to some of this.
What do you think the influence is? What are your thoughts on him? And you have spoken to him about this. So what do you make of it?
Yeah, I can't say for sure exactly why he's taking this posture, but based on my conversations with him before he launched his candidacy, I find it hard to believe. First of all, in the case of the assassination of his father, Robert F. Kennedy, RFK Jr. is known for believing that Sirhan was not the gunman. He's a supporter of Lisa Peace's work, whose book on the assassination of RFK I could not recommend more strongly. It's very, very detailed. And essentially, if you know that Sirhan was not the gunman of RFK and that it was someone else, likely affiliated with the CIA, per Lisa Peace's work,
so that squashes that theory that some people had, that that's the reason why RFK has the position that he has in reference to Israel and Gaza, because Whitney Webb just explained to you that he actually does not believe that Sirhan killed his father. So just FYI.
The whole the reasoning that was given to the public about why Sirhan did it was about the Israel-Palestine issue.
Right.
And then you have Rabbi Shmuley, who has sort of constantly accompanied RFK Jr. when he has made these particular statements, at least in the beginning, though he's, of course, done it since without him. But Shmuley has brought up this claim that, RFK was assassinated for supporting Israel. Well, RFK Jr. would have to know that that isn't accurate. In addition, we were talking once when I was invited on his podcast to talk about an article I did about the CIA in Ukraine in the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. And he asked me something to the effect of, why would a Jewish president, Zelensky, willingly ally with Azov Battalion, a neo-Nazi group? And I brought up the Stern Gang, how the Stern Gang had attempted to ally with Nazi Germany during the Holocaust in order to advance the Zionist objective of establishing a Jewish ethno-state in Palestine. And he was aware of who the Stern Gang was aware of that, but claimed that it happened before or not during the Holocaust, but that's actually not true. But anyway, if you're aware of who the Stern Gang is, then you would have to know that the Stern Gang, the leader of it, Itzhak Shamir, became prime minister of Israel in the 1980s. The Stern Gang self-defined themselves as a terrorist group. They used terror, by their own admission, in the mass murder of Palestinian civilians in order to ethnically cleanse Palestine. That was, one of their several objectives, and they were an outgrowth of the group called Irgun, whose leader was Menachem Begin when he went on to create the Heirut Party, the precursor to Likud. He also, and essentially, the former leaders of Irgun and the Stern Gang are what run Israel today. And their ideological lineage goes back to a man named Zev Jabotinsky, who was directly influenced by Mussolini-style fascism, and sought to create Israel in that ethno-fascist model specifically. So if you're someone like RFK Jr. and you claim to stand against fascism and racism, it's very hard to genuinely believe and mean that and support, Likud party politics, which since its inception has been steeped in fascism and this feeling of ethno-supremacy.
Unless you're a fraud, unless you don't really believe those things and you're saying what needs to be said to potentially help your campaign. And this is something that people really need to think about, right? Like how can he be against those things and for what the state of Israel is doing at the same time?
Which, frankly, if you're against ethno-supremacism, whether you should be consistently against it.
Right.
You should say fascism is always bad. Ethno-supremacy specifically, when it's combined with fascism is bad. I think we all learned that during World War II, right? So if those are bad, they should be bad in Israel as well.
Right.
And now we're at a point where we're being told that being against Likud party politics and policies is anti-Semitic. That's insane. It's not even anti-Zionist to say that. Early Zionism was dominated by like labor Zionism. Even early writings of Jabotinsky argue for equal rights for Arabs and for Palestinians. And that is not equal. That is not the policy of Israel's current government. Yeah. So it's either saying, if you don't agree with the current policies of the current Israeli government, you're an anti-Semite. I mean, that is absolutely ludicrous. And really, anyone towing that line who claims to be against fascism and ethno-supremacy cannot really hold those views, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's either that, he doesn't really stand against fascism, or he's okay with it happening in Israel, in which case he's okay with it happening sometimes and he's not really against it.
100%. So is he really against fascism, or does he only against it, some of the time? Now, that's not even the bombshell. Here's the bombshell. Listen to what Whitney says more about the RFK Epstein connection, other than the plane. So listen to this part too. This is the part I was not aware of.
You've got RFK Jr. having been on Epstein's plane. It could also just be the idea of I can't win an election unless I'm pro-Israel, right? It could just be the political of that could be the motivation.
But
right
I don't know if it's that, because you have people that took sort of middle of the road lines. For example, Ron Paul's views on Israel, and
but he didn't
there's
win.
Other candidates that sort of took well, okay, fair enough, yeah, but
Ron Paul didn't win. To Kim's point, but at the same time, when you look at all the other candidates and their position on Israel, RFK's position on Israel is way, way, way over the top compared to everyone else, to the point where he was in the parade carrying the flag, and it's just like major ass kissing. It's way over the top, so much to the point that it's suspicious.
I think it would have been possible to have not taken. Honestly, the position RFK Jr. has taken on Israel is not even the norm within the Democratic Party. It's honestly, as a colleague of mine, Sam Husseini, once said, it's to the right of Newt Gingrich, essentially.
Follow Sam Husseini on Twitter, you guys. I follow him. I'm going to try to see if I can bring him on as well.
Yeah, to call the Palestinian people the most pampered, as they're literally buried under
that's
rubble.
Absurd.
Totally absurd.
Yeah.
So do you think that there was anything, you've talked to him about the Epstein flights. He's been on them twice.
Yes.
Do you think that there was anything there to that?
So he explained them to me, and he told me there were 2 flights, and then he, I don't know if it was him or one of his campaign people, went and told Newsweek it was 1 flight, and then it became 2 flights again. And what he has said since about the 2 flights is pretty much exactly what he told me. He told me that he met Epstein and Ghislaine through his wife, Mary Richardson, and I was able to corroborate aspects of that. But I also wrote in my book that Ghislaine Maxwell in the early 90s, really before her father's death, before the death of Robert Maxwell, was essentially being used by Robert Maxwell. He was trying to get her to marry a Kennedy.
What? This was the part I was not aware of, because someone actually, they sent this interview to me in an email, and they said, Sabs, please watch Kim's recent interview with Whitney Webb. And I was like, okay, let me check it out. And so I was listening to this interview. It was in the background, and I was doing something else. And then it got to this part, and I was like, say what? So let's hear what Whitney said again here. This is important.
Said since about the 2 flights is pretty much exactly what he told me. He told me that he met Epstein and Ghislaine through his wife, Mary Richardson, and I was able to corroborate aspects of that. But I also wrote in my book that Ghislaine Maxwell in the early 90s, really before her father's death, before the death of Robert Maxwell, was essentially being used by Robert Maxwell. He was trying to get her to marry a Kennedy.
So Ghislaine Maxwell's father, before he passed away, he was trying to get her to marry a Kennedy. I told you guys 2024 was going to be wild, but this is such a tangled web we weave. This is wild. Trying to get her to marry a Kennedy. Then you have RFK Jr. on Jeffrey Epstein's plane twice. It just makes me wonder if any other Kennedys were already connected to Oh, it just makes me wonder. It makes me wonder. Let me let her finish, and I'll see if I have that picture. I had a picture. I thought I downloaded. Let me let her finish.
And so there was a lot of activity of Ghislaine around the Kennedy family with JFK Jr., with RFK Jr., and with RFK Jr.'s older brother. And she was also, for example, a guest at the Kerry Kennedy wedding to Andrew Cuomo, and was invited from the Kerry Kennedy side of that, not the Cuomo side of that. So there was a lot of, I guess, intermingling between Ghislaine Maxwell and the Kennedy clan in that particular point in time.
And if that's the case, then it could be possible. You wonder if there's some type of blackmail against RFK Jr. She even mentioned the Cuomo. This was the other part that kind of threw me. I was like, what?
Robert Maxwell, he was trying to get her to marry a Kennedy. And so there was a lot of activity of Ghislaine around the Kennedy family with JFK Jr., with RFK Jr., and with RFK Jr.'s older brother. And she was also, for example, a guest at the Kerry Kennedy wedding to Andrew Cuomo, and was invited from the Kerry Kennedy side of that, not the Cuomo side of that. So there was a lot of, I guess, intermingling between Ghislaine Maxwell and the Kennedy clan in that particular point in time. And unfortunately, I found something out after my book was already going to print that I couldn't include and that I haven't been able to question RFK Jr. about. But there's images of him at Ghislaine Maxwell's apartment, I believe in 2014, 2015, but it seems to have been related to some sort of environmental advocacy thing, since at the time he was an environmentally focused lawyer, and she was involved in sort of her environmental overtures and nonprofits like Terramar. So obviously there was some sort of continuing relationship, at least with Ghislaine Maxwell, beyond that. Was it just in the world of philanthropy? Like I said, I haven't been able to ask him about it, but it isn't something that just ended forever in the mid 90s. And as far as what he told me, when he discussed how he felt about Epstein and what he observed, he definitely did portray Ghislaine in sort of a much more sympathetic light and portrayed Epstein in a negative way. And, unfortunately, that's his account, or the account that he wanted to portray. And I, can report that he said that, but I can't corroborate his, details of that, or exactly where they went. Did they really go on a fossil trip? Were his children on board and all of that? But, frankly, I think it's quite well known at this point that RFK Jr. had a troubled youth, and that if someone were to want to blackmail him with something, it wouldn't necessarily have required something like going on Epstein's plane.
Right.
Because frankly, into intelligence services,
and that's been well known. Yeah.
Yeah. So if intelligence services want to blackmail someone, they'll go about it any number of different ways. And again, I don't know if RFK is taking this because he was necessarily blackmailed. There could be many different motivations behind it, but obviously the Epstein connection has got people thinking about that, and it's definitely within the realm of possibility. And I definitely feel that way, given, what appears to me to be sort of the forced nature of the stance. And again, I find it very disappointing. And I think it, unfortunately, the extreme partisanship has done a lot of damage to the health freedom movement. And I find that very regrettable.
Listen, because see, Whitney wrote a book about this, and I'll show you one more thing, guys, because I just wanted you to see more connections. Because like I said before, oh no, I don't know why it's doing that. Copy and paste is a buzzkill sometimes. Okay, let's try this way. If it does it just right. Okay, yeah. Okay, so Check this out, guys. I want to show you something. Somebody shared this with me too. Let's talk about another connection. So let's just follow the connection with Ghislaine Maxwell, right? So look, the Epstein case is getting weirder by the minute. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had a stepfather, Samuel Pisar. Pisar served as the trusted lawyer of Mossad spy Robert Maxwell, father of Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell had a strange and suspicious death drowning from his yacht. That is true, because the documentary I saw, they talked about that too. Look at this, guys. Check this out. Let me go back out, because you either see it that way. Let's follow the tree here. Anthony Blinken, I didn't know this. Anthony Blinken, stepson of Samuel Pisar. Samuel Pisar, they're saying was the lawyer of Robert Maxwell, right? So that was Ghislaine's father. So Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, and then Ghislaine Maxwell as the accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein. So I guess what I'm trying to say here, folks, what a tangled web we weave. And this also goes to show you just how many people Ghislaine Maxwell was actually somewhat close to that you may not have thought of. If she had that close of a connection to Anthony Blinken, think about how close her connection was to RFK, based on what Whitney told you in that interview.